even though only started podcasting this year after listening to other people doing podcasting, I thought I'd give it a crack. Podcasting is like doing a smaller version of a radio show. I don't know if this is going to be a radio show, but have you ever wondered what goes into a podcast before? Because people only hear what's only been recorded. I sometimes think to myself, back when I was working with KC Radio and I did a lot of radio shows, it was like having a 3-hour conversation with the co-host. Before I started podcasting, I did a bit of research into what goes into podcasting, and I did a lot of right ideas before I started, so you can keep the conversation going with one or two people you're working with on the podcast. Throughout my radio career, I've had a lot of people working around me, so the concept of doing a podcast did interest me, because I never recorded anything by myself before in radio. I always worked in groups or with somebody. Like all the top people in commercial radio, they have producers helping them come up with topics and what they want to talk about on radio. I cannot help think about what it is like for someone like Neil Mitchell on 3AW. How does he, with all the topics he talks about on radio 5 days a week, and yes, it comes down to teamwork between Neil and his producer. I have a lot of respect for people that produce a one-person radio show. I have to admit, before I started writing and producing scripts for this podcast, I didn't know what I was going to talk about for podcasts. But then I sat back and thought about it, and to me, podcasts are only favourite parts of a radio show mixed all together. So when I started producing and podcasting, I didn't know what to expect. Even though doing radio in the past, I did not write everything down for radio. It wasn't scripted. It was all recorded live. If someone said to me, what do I prefer, live radio or pre-recorded radio, I would have to say live radio wins every time, because live radio is unpredictable. However, I've done both. I've had people over the years say to me, how do I come up with stuff out of my head? It makes perfect radio. If you think about what I'd have to say all the time, it wouldn't come out as natural. So, as the same as talking through a microphone. By that I mean, when I talk into a microphone, it's just off the top of my head. I don't have to think about it much. It just comes out. But in recent months, I've enjoyed producing stuff for this podcast, because I believe whether a person has a disability or does not have a disability or is able-bodied, I believe that when producing things for radio, people's disability doesn't come into it. I've always liked seeing people with disabilities involved in radio or podcasting, because it gives people with disabilities the opportunity to express themselves via media. When I started working in radio back when I was 17, this was the attitude towards people with disabilities. They were only prepared to give people with disabilities entertainment 1 hour per week. In that time of a period of 18 years, I myself have done a 6-hour time slot, a 4-hour time slot, a 3-hour time slot. So I can't even imagine where that concept of 1 hour per week towards disability entertainment came from, because I've worked those hours, and altogether, it doesn't matter how many hours you work, it's still disability entertainment. People in recent weeks have asked me I should do more writing, but at the moment I'm producing a podcast which involves writing as well. But I have the opportunity to use, Naturally Speaking, a voice-to-text program which does help me write things down and makes things a lot easier to produce for people like me doing a podcast. So as you can hear, I'm constantly writing things down using a microphone to make it easier for me to write things down. I just wished I had this technology when I was at primary school and high school, because Naturally Speaking has made things a lot easier for me to write things down. Can you imagine what it was like for me to produce my own radio show that lasted 18 years between 1993 and 2011? I've had a lot of good help from people. As an example, in 2009 until 2011, the radio show was produced every Saturday night for 3 hours. So can you imagine, a lot of my radio career was unscripted. I've always had co-hosts to work off. It's not until this year I've started to write scripts for this podcast, and I've had to learn to read off a computer screen to make it sound natural. A lot of the times, a lot of the stuff I said was coming out of my head, and at the same time I had to think about what I was going to say next. None of it was written down. Trust me, the joys of live radio, because you can never predict what was going to happen. As they say, podcasting, in the podcasting world, keep on making good content. If you have enjoyed this podcast, give us a like and comment, and we'll see you next time. Bye.